The winners and the losers of today's draft lottery. The first winner has to be the Atlanta Hawks. What's ironic about them getting the #1 pick is not only that they didn't have great odds to get it, but they were literally saying during the broadcast that Landry Fields, as long as he's been GM, they've never won the lottery. So it was almost like foreshadowing, like the fact that they were saying that and then they won the lottery. So shout out to the Atlanta Hawks. They are obviously one of the winners of this draft. I understand that people are saying this draft, for example, doesn't have a Victor Wembanyama. And while that may be true, we'll see what happens. Every draft always ends up having good players. And there's always going to be at least one franchise player in the draft. You just have to pick him. Now, he could be #1, which the Hawks are hoping for, but he could be like the 10th overall pick. That remains to be seen. But the Hawks, a team that is obviously trying to win, like they don't really want to rebuild again, because they kind of, started their rebuild with Trae Young and stuff like that. So a team that doesn't really want to rebuild, but more like retool their roster in order to be more of a contender, because they have contending type players on there. It's just not working together. So I don't really expect them to trade this pick, because they do also have a lot of young talent in which, again, it's kind of like rebuilding, but they're more like retooling. I know, it just doesn't really make sense. But I don't expect them to trade this pick unless they get an offer potentially that just makes them, reconsider that. And we've seen a bunch of draft boards having different players go #1. There's no consensus. If the Hawks keep this pick, I could see them taking Alex Sarr because he's a big man. He's 7'2", I think. And although they have Onyeka Okongwu, who, if you watch this page, I'm a fan of his, Clint Capella is still their starting center. And while Clint Capella always does good things on the court, he's not on the same timeline anymore, at least I don't think. And so I feel like Alex Sarr, depending on what he ends up being in the NBA, he could be someone who could really be life-changing for them. The first loser of the draft is so sad. It is the Detroit Pistons. Now, I use the term loser lightly because, like I said, you never know where the gems are in the draft. I mean, what pick did Trae Young go? Was he #5 or he was 4? Him and Luka were swapped for each other. It might have been 3 and 4 or 4 and 5, but that's still a top 5 pick. That doesn't mean because you have the 5th pick, you're not going to get the better player. And I think Pistons fans love Ausar Thompson because he was really good in his rookie year. So, Ausar Thompson was not a #2 overall pick, and he's turned out pretty good so far. The reason why they are considered the losers of the draft, technically, again, there's really no losers because you never know. But I believe for the past 3 consecutive drafts, they had one of the best odds to get the #1 pick, and they still just keep falling out, or at least to be in the top 4. And they just can't seem to get a #1 pick, a #2 pick. It just never goes in their favor. And especially last year with Victor Wembanyama, everybody wanted the #1 pick, and rightfully so, because Victor Wembanyama looks like he's going to be that good. So it is unfortunate for Detroit. Didn't get a top pick, didn't get the #1 pick. But again, #5, you still may have something really good there. And the last winner of the draft was the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets, we all know, have a ton of young talent. So much young talent. They brought in Ime Udoka, who did an amazing job. Yes, they didn't end up, finishing in the playoffs, but they had a couple of 10-game winning streaks. There were times where they were just lighting it up and they could not lose. And this was even after Sengun went down. They went on that 10-game winning streak, and Jalen Green was just insane. I think a lot of us think Ime Udoka is a very good coach. And so what he's done with the Rockets definitely was improvement this year, and he'll only make them better next year, in my opinion. The reason why they're the winner is because on top of the fact that they got all this, young talent, Jalen Green, Sengun, and all these players, they also, brought in Fred VanVleet and some veteran leadership, and Dylan Brooks was really good for them this year. And they just added some quality players to the roster to kind of balance out the young versus veterans and just make it more of a complete team. So now they literally have the #3 overall pick that they got from the Nets because this was part of the James Harden trade. So now they have options. They have a #3 overall pick, which they can keep and use and draft somebody else, or they can literally trade that pick to somebody and package it with the player. And now you could be looking at the Rockets as a legit playoff contender. I don't know how to say it. Like, I'm not going to say championship contender, but like a legit playoff contender, like someone who is a threat to make the playoffs. That obviously depends on who they would get in return. But if you're the Rockets, you got a lot of options. You're heading in the right direction. There is a lot going for the Rockets, so they are also a winner. Let me know in the comments down below who you think are the winners of the draft lottery.